Welcome to Oneself. My name is Stephen Maher. With me today and with me always is Adam Bartleman. Adam, thanks so much for joining me. Really appreciate you taking some time. Some initial thoughts just off my mind, man. You asked me what's been going on off air, right? Honesty. Honesty has been really present in my mind.
Mm,
They're not like big lies that I tell to myself, but I noticed that oftentimes it was like a bunch of little lies, right? And I think I was doing that in an effort to just, yeah, keep me safe, keep the ego safe, keep me protected so I didn't have to address how I truly felt about things. And, that's been top of mind recently. So I'm just trying to be, I feel like I've always, with other people, I try to be, just speak nothing but the truth. It's
mhm.
just, but I wasn't applying that to myself, I think I've noticed recently. And so that's just been a really conscious effort that I've been trying to make is really, yeah, man, just trying to be really honest with myself and in an effort to not push down whatever emotions I'm feeling, to really, really try to sit there with them, sit with them, and experience what's going on so I can acknowledge it and let it go, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's powerful, man, because we have to be honest with ourselves if we're walking in full integrity. And something I've always noticed about people that lie to others, it's like ultimately if somebody's lying to others, that means that they have to be lying to themselves. And if we can kind of hold ourselves accountable to the degree that we're catching ourselves in even those little lies, those little ego stories that are being told to protect something, then that's a really good track to be on. And I would ask you first of all, like what are the lies you're telling yourself? Like not what are the lies you're telling yourself, but why? Like what are you trying to keep yourself safe from?
That's a good question. That's a good question. I guess that's still something I'm trying to work on and sit with and internalize. And yeah, I think it just goes back to I'm 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 a perfectionist, I think, in a lot of ways. And even with this podcast, right? Like I'm telling you, I have a horrible time taking the advice that I give to other people that I should apply to my own life, right? And when it came to this show, I'm like, what am I always telling you? Where it's like, perfect is the enemy of good. Perfect is the enemy of good. And it's like I really need to tell myself that. So it's
Yeah,
like I think I tell myself these little lies because I want things to be like perfect, you know?
yeah,
And I want the things I do to be perfect, but it's like of course I know that, everything is a process, right? And it's just and everything is you're always tinkering to make something better, but, you know, yeah, man, I think that's just yeah, I don't know, kind of the conclusion I came to as we hear some little puppers.
yeah. Some noise that just
Yeah.
very, very empty road here, and then all of a sudden three big trucks go by. Yeah, that's um sorry, can you sorry, I got a little distracted there. Can you
No,
just
man, yeah, you
remind me?
lost your train of thought.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
just to reiterate, I think like I was telling you, like I always tell you when it comes to this
oh
show,
yeah,
right? It's just
yeah,
like, perfect is the enemy of good. And I
yeah,
really, really live by that. Like when it comes to everything, right? When it's like you want to get back into the gym, it's like, or as a musician, when it's like, I want to practice my instrument more. It's like, do I need to sit down for a 4 hour practice session every day? Like, no, like that is ideal, right?
yeah,
That is my ideal workout for music, or, would I love to spend 2 hours in the gym every day to really, to stretch and then cardio and then weights and, hit all the things I want to do? Like, of course, but it's like, it's better just to get in the gym or just to play my instrument for however much time I have that day. Like, at least you picked it up, or at least you put yourself in that situation. And I think with the conclusion I've drawn, it's like why I'm telling myself these like little lies is that it's like I want things to be perfect, right?
yeah,
And so is that ego? Probably, right? Where I'm like, I do these little things or I say these things and I'm like, that aren't necessarily true, but it's like I want them to be that's what how I want them to be, right? It's like I want it to be that level of perfect, or that version of myself, the perfect version of myself that I'm like trying to aspire to be, that I'm not there yet right now, but
Yeah.
it's easier for me to cope, I guess, with that by saying those things. But like you said, that's like that's not an integrity. So it's just like, yeah, it's just like, why am I doing that? You know, I'm really trying to wrestle with that lately, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it really helps to sort of pick apart all the elements of it. So, and the first thing that comes to mind is, what is this idea of perfection, and what is that? What is the definition of that? Because, like many of these things that are coming from the ego, and you're right on with that assessment, we just have to look at them unflinchingly, honestly, and with a lot of courage and consistently, and they will fall apart. Because you look at something like the idea of perfection, it doesn't take long following that thread to have that whole thing unravel and be like, what is whose definition of perfection? You'll realize that your definition of perfection changes constantly, and it's the ideas of perfection are just ideas, and they've come from outside influences. They've come from societal programming. They've come from, like, images we've seen in media, ideas we've seen in media, storylines, archetypes that have come through our society, through our lives, and it really, none of it has any validity. None of it's real. They're all just thought forms. So I would say, like, what's the idea of perfect? Like, what is this? Is like this superhuman who can get all the exercise in, and be creative like multiple hours a day, and not take any time for rest. Like, generally, that's like this overproductive archetype that we've been fed, especially as men, that doesn't actually make sense, is quite contrary to our natural state of being and any state of well-being, really. So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I mean, as a kid, I love superheroes, dude. I still love superheroes, like if I'm being honest. And it's
Mm.
like, yeah, when you say like cultural programming, it's like, yeah, like you put your blanket around your neck and you tie it and you jump
Yeah, I
on
did
the
that too.
bed. Yeah, man, like it's like you want to be great, or I wanted to be, or I still want to be great. And I think I'm just trying to reconcile vulnerability is a superpower as well, and being flawed is human, right? And it's just that's just the human condition, right? It's like we're all flawed beings, and we're all trying to just do, or at least I hope, right? A lot of us are just trying to do the best we can,
Yeah.
and in this life. And I don't know. Yeah, 100. I don't know where that idea of like that was like seated in me. Like you said, it might be, cultural programming or my upbringing or whatever, of just like the things that I've seen where it's like I need to be perfect, and
Yes.
that's not
Well,
true.
we've been fed these images or these ideas of things that we're not, and then also we haven't really, for the most part, experienced unconditional love, because we've come into the world guided by people who haven't experienced unconditional love themselves. So when we are taught that love is conditional, we have to do the right things. We have to become, but as we're children, we have to be better behaved. We have to learn more words as we're learning to speak, and then we get more approval. We're kind of taught very early on to be chasing something, that we're not. And because the idea that there is something such as perfection, as a thought form, as some image, as some tangible, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, tangible thing to be achieved. Like, again, the closer we look at that, the more it reveals itself to make no sense at all. And I think that the really important thing to consider here is, consider the possibility that maybe we already are perfect. What is this idea that we're not? Why do we have to be chasing something outside of us? And I think it comes back to that early programming on that comes through conditional love. Then we're conditionally loving ourselves. We're saying, well, if I meet this condition, then I will love myself. If I become more perfect, which, again, the image for what that is slotted into place by, society and the images we've been given. The whole, again, the superhero thing, like, follow that a little bit. What is that all about? It's if you look at it more closely, you can see it's a little bit twisted, and is going to naturally result in people searching for something outside of themselves. And yeah, so I guess I would just say that is an important thing to consider, is that who says we're not perfect already?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a valid point. Me
Yeah.
myself where I'm at, I guess. Oh, yeah, and when I think about school, right? I was very fortunate in the public school systems that I attended in Massachusetts. Objectively were considered great, but it's great in what sense and by whose definition too,
Yeah.
where there's so many different types of intelligence, and I put that pressure on myself where it's like to perform in school,
Yeah.
but a lot of that's memorization. A lot of that history, again, where, again, I think we both enjoy history, right? A lot of that history isn't even the full truth. I
Not even
remember learning
close.
about World War II, and it was a very Americanized, propagandized version of World War II history where we dropped the sun twice on Japan as well. And it's like,
Man.
did that save lives? Maybe. It's like, but who can say, right? It was still
Yeah.
an atrocity, and everyone committed atrocities. But I remember the version of history I learned was like, we saved the world, like America saved the world. And again, I'm not that much of a historian, but it's just like I remember learning that history, and then you learn more things as you get older, and it was like that was just a version of history that someone was taught to me, and who printed those textbooks? I'm getting off on a tangent, but the point being, it's like I was trying to be perfect for who and for what? For
Yeah.
those teachers, for my parents, and why. And grades, you learn these things in school where it's like I'm not an engineer, I'm not learning, calculus, or I'm not using calculus in
Yeah.
my day-to-day life, you know what I mean? Most of that stuff I'm not even using in
Yeah.
anymore. And cursive, right? I remember they put such an emphasis on like cursive handwriting, and it was like you're going to need this forever. And it's like, of course everyone's just typing on their laptops and their phones now, and so a lot of that stuff was maybe not pointless. I don't know. Maybe I got something out of it, but it's just like, for what? For
Yeah.
what was I doing those things? But I know that the emphasis to get good grades, the emphasis to be like perfect academically, and that feeds into college as well, where it's like I was fed into this pipeline of like, doing well in school, and, if you go to college and you'll get a good job. And a lot of people are recognizing that story that we were told is so flawed, right? And to
It's
put
a
yourself
lie.
in immense amounts of debt. Yeah, it was a lie, man. And to put yourself in immense amounts of debt as well, for again, for what? For a lie. Like the job market's awful right now, and a lot of people are feeling that.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to make a living. And so it's just like, man, like that need to be perfect, or that desire to be perfect is like, I'm like, who was I doing it for? What was I doing it for? It's like, yeah, man, it kind of makes me like frustrated that it's like I don't know, recognize sooner. But again, you're a kid. You think other people know best, right? When you're a kid, and you think adults, they have it figured out, and it's like you get older and you're just like, no one does. No one has the
Yeah.
answers.
Yeah, and like this to me, it sounds a lot like the way Don Miguel Ruiz explains the dream of the planet in that very famous book, The Four Agreements, where we're essentially coming onto the planet when we don't remember what's up. We've got amnesia. And so we absorb the dreams of others around us, our elders, our parents, and we buy into the system that they bought into, and we follow the patterns that they followed. We seek this indefinable, intangible idea of perfection that has something to do with being like essentially a superhero with, millions of dollars, somewhere along those lines, but still intangible and ever changing. We realize ultimately that is a huge part of the journey, is coming to realize that that's all a lie, that happiness doesn't come from without, that it comes from within. And we have to reach that point on our journey when we stop looking outward and finally realize that even though we have maybe no roadmap for it, the path is inward, and we're going to try for it anyway, because seeking perfection in the external world, it doesn't exist. And again, to use the example of just like our physical bodies, people are trying to perfect themselves. Well, this is a finite expression of ourselves. We age and we deteriorate and we die in these physical forms. So what is so if we're placing so much importance on, say, physical perfection, in the gym, eating right, taking care of ourselves. Not that those things aren't great when done from an unattached and healthy place, but when they're attached to as being the elements that are going to define our happiness, that is going to create suffering at some point. Even if it creates an illusion of happiness for, a couple decades of being fit and, attractive, whatever, based on societal standards, that's going to come with a down with a decline at some point. So you're going to be setting yourself up for suffering and this is why people are, hanging on so hard with their plastic surgery and hair loss treatments and everything like that, right? They're trying to hang on to something that is fleeting by its very nature. So again, this idea of perfection, we have to look at it and realize that the happiness that we're truly seeking underneath that striving for perfection is not coming from outside of us.
Yeah, it is insane the uptick in surgeries, augmentations. You see balding men flying to Turkey to get the hair transplants, and
Right.
or women, right? All kinds of surgeries, right? For nose, or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And aging is a gift too. It's like that in itself is like you are alive longer than most of human history has ever. Like the average age of a human being, right? Was what for under 35 probably for most of human history. And it's like if you get
Yeah.
past that point in the lottery of human beings that have ever lived, you won, right?
Yeah.
Just you're existing longer than many other of our ancestors ever have, right? And yeah, man, I think it's yeah, we're just chasing something that never existed in the first place. And
Yeah.
yeah, I just think I've come to that conclusion these past couple weeks. I've really been just sitting on this stuff, and it's just like, oh, yeah, man, just let it go, right? Let the idea of perfection go, because it's never
Yes.
existed. And that's not to say there's not to be content with life, or to want to get better at certain things, and to respect that process. I think that's a different thing versus being perfect, right? I'll never be perfect at anything,
Right. And well, and again, what is perfect anyway? So it doesn't even matter. It's like we just do our best, really. Like,
right?
trying to keep things in shape. So,
Yeah.
but like you said, yeah, like our little tag there. But
Trying to get back in shape.
trying to
Can
get
I
back
tell
in
you that
shape.
story?
No, go ahead.
So I was I don't know, I think I was like 18, and me and my brother were going hiking with our girlfriends at the time. Um, and we were hiking in the White Mountains in New Hampshire, and we were staying at my brother's girlfriend's family cabin, right? Like in the middle of the woods, beautiful location, beautiful area. And we went on a hike, and we met this guy named John in the middle of the woods. And this man was old, dude, like weathered face, like wrinkles everywhere, and had to have been 80s. And we're high up, like we're on a hard, like White Mountain hiking it's a hard hike, right? And so here's this like 80 something year old man. He looks like he's out of a pioneer photo, like the old school backpack and, old school boots and hike, yeah, just like this man looks old school, right? And he just had a presence as we passed him. And my brother was like, "You should go talk to that guy." And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." You come upon someone and they have a presence. And I was like, "Hey, like, how you doing? Just checking in." And I think he thought like I was checking in because like he knows he's old, and I was just like, "Are you good?" sort of thing. And he was like, "No, like I'm fine." And I was like, "What's your name?" And he was like, "Oh, I'm John, and just trying to get back in shape." And like if that 80 something year old man can can get back in shape, man, like at his point in life where it's just like again, he looked weathered, right? Like he looked like
Yeah.
he just whatever experiences he's been through, he went through it, right? Whatever
Yeah.
that was. And at his age just trying to get back in shape. Like, I just loved that. I just loved that quote and what he was trying to do, and just the fact that I have no excuse. No matter what age I'm at in life, no matter, I have no excuse to not try and get better, as you said, right?
Yeah.
Just get better every day. Like, if that guy can do it, my heroes, my fitness heroes, or my health and wellness heroes, man, they're not the young kids, or the younger people on steroids. Like, that's not my idea of health. I love the people that are like, yeah, in their 70s, 60s,
Yeah.
80s, that are like still getting after it after
Yeah.
how many decades, and they're still in shape, right? They're just trying to
Yeah.
stay in shape, just trying to keep the game going. Like, those are my heroes when it comes to health and fitness, like John, right? Like
Yeah.
that guy John, right? He's just, just trying to get back in shape.
Yeah, and I think that brings it back to the whole, like bringing it back to the whole conversation around perfection, and like, not that we don't do these things to take care of ourselves, but it's just the attachment. It's the energy behind it, right? It's like with everything. It's not what you're doing necessarily, it's the energy that with which you're doing it. So when someone is just trying to stay healthy, trying to maintain the physical vessel through which they are expressing themselves in this on this planet, in this dimension, in this time frame, in this incarnation, that's a beautiful thing. Not that the person has to have, an 8 pack and be able to do 100 pull-ups in like 20 minutes or something, but like it's it's just taking care of ourselves, and the seeking of perfection in a craft or in an art, it doesn't have to be this idea of perfection that is, again, coming through comparison, coming through, that is conditional, like I need to hit this milestone before I can rest and say and accept that I've been a good boy today. It's just expressing from a place of sincere wholeness, of like, this isn't done because there's a perceived need for it. This is being done because it is just a joyful expression of my soul that is naturally occurring because my cup is full. Like, this is the overflow of energy from my cup because I am already loving myself in a whole and complete and balanced way. And I now that I'm not striving for something on the external, like in the external, now I'm just allowing myself to be, and from that centered place in the seat of self, the expression is just natural and it's effortless. And that's when I think someone is in the place to, for to just give the example of having a super regulated nervous system, then they're able to express themselves as best as they can and attain something that others looking in from the outside might consider perfection, whether it's an art, or maybe even a physical milestone, like, hitting a record on a hike or something like that, or in a race or something, right? It's like, it's when someone is so attuned with themselves that then that natural expression and that outflow of energy becomes so pure, and it's really tapped into this infinite energy, this infinite life flow, that then that's when the real magic happens. But it comes after we release our ideas of what perfection's supposed to be, because again, that's coming through the mind, that's coming through the ego, which is a finite aspect of us. And I know that's tough for people to stomach because we interact with the world primarily through our ego. We've been conditioned to looking through the lens that is actually representing the smallest aspect of our awareness, but that is the case, right? We're looking at the world through our ego, and that's not really the uh, the deepest place of awareness.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Yeah, no, I'm quiet because you give me, as always, dude. You give me give me lots to think about, in the best way. And yeah, I guess for especially in the last couple weeks, months, I've definitely just been, yeah, at odds with my ego, and think, oh man, I forget who said it. Maybe it was like Ram Dass or something. But it was just like, instead of like wrestling with my ego, I became partners with it. I became friends with it, and in the pursuit of all the things you were talking about, right? Instead of this like adversarial, me fighting to like tamp my ego down. It's like,
Yeah.
partnering with my ego against the problem of whatever we're faced with, right? Whatever comes into my life, where it's, yeah, okay, if it's me and my ego versus the idea of perfection, or I think that's just a healthier way to like reframe the things that are going on in my mind in an effort to better understand myself and this
Yeah.
life.
Yeah, and it's in that pursuit is extremely important to become friends with those parts, because ultimately those parts of the ego are like, it's sort of like, again, the parts work language. These split off parts of ego are like little different survival mechanisms that we have adopted at different points to respond to a scary world that we didn't understand and didn't have anyone to guide us through. So when those parts are existing, like, for example, the part that has this idea, this vague idea of whatever perfection is, it's something that it's trying to chase. So you you come into conversation with that part of yourself, and different techniques for doing that. But you open up a conversation with that part of your ego, and you listen to it. You hear what it has to say. You make sure that you're not trying to push it away because it's something that you're trying to get rid of. You listen to it, you welcome it in, you open that conversation, and you hear its story. And through that process you will see its origin story. You will see when the beliefs that it holds were formed, what you were going through in your life at the time that those beliefs were formed. You can see why that all makes sense. You can see where those beliefs came from in the way that, like the dream of the world, like Don Miguel Ruiz speaks about, who you got these ideas from, like where did these distorted dreams come from. And when we see that and like the falsehood of them, we can then begin to release them. So we release the beliefs, and then that part of ego that was chasing perfection, it can now come back because it's not feeling imperfect. That part, for example, the part that's chasing perfection, at some point, that is a response to a feeling that it was not perfect. So you can bring that part, or those multiple parts, depending on the case, back into wholeness. And all of a sudden, you don't have that unconscious drive. You don't have that energy sitting there in your subconscious. You don't have that shadow there. This is shadow work, right? We're bringing the shadow out of the darkness into the light. And then when we do that, we don't have that stuck energy pattern in our subconscious, which is unconsciously magnetizing more experiences that make us feel imperfect, because the subconscious is trying to get us to realize that we need to bring these parts back into wholeness. So the external reality mirrors it back to us until we wake up and realize, like, chasing it in the external is, in this example, chasing it in the external is just a loop, is not going to get us anywhere. We're chasing our tails. So it's like, when we see that system all working together as it does, when we tune into ourselves and become aware of how our internal system, and that internal family system, as that one's psychological school of thought frames it, is working with us, is working for us, and everything is happening for us. And again, bringing it back to the example of the perfection, it's just trying to bring something that was left out in the cold back in to sit by the fire with us.
Yeah. So I
To
think
come,
go for it.
I was going to say, to come back home. I know that was a bit of a rambling tangent there, but essentially it's like,
Oh man, I follow.
yeah, okay, it's like whatever's going on there, it whatever's not whenever something is not feeling right, and whether that's feeling down on ourselves, feeling anxious, feeling projecting too far into the future, that's all something that is drawing our attention to something in our subconscious that needs to be brought back into wholeness. I don't necessarily like the word healing so much, because it implies that there's something wounded, but ultimately what we are isn't wounded. We just have ideas. We have distorted beliefs about ourselves that need to be resolved and released, in order that we can see ourselves more clearly and understand that we are and always have been perfect. Again, the conversation around that specific point, it's because the idea that we're not is just from a world of a collective dream of ideas that are very distorted, which, that's another conversation how that all comes about. Ultimately, it's like realizing the idea that we're not perfect is not real, and we have to bring that part of us that believes that back into wholeness by opening that conversation with it and releasing its negative belief, and replacing it with a positive one, and yeah, bringing it back home.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm almost trying to think like, in an ideal world, like if I was raised differently, which is hard, like as a parent, like, neither of us are parents, right? But it's just like if I had a hypothetical child that I want to raise in, yeah, like in harmony, in harmony with their ego. It's like, how would I even go about doing that? Or starting with myself, right? You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, like I want to pour from a full cup, right, into this hypothetical child. That was
Yep.
maybe it was me, right? Or just a child of my own. It's like, how would I do that? How would I raise someone or like reparent myself, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing, and ultimately, when we bring the conversation back to oneness, it is all the same thing. And if we're commenting on using the entry point of the conversation on raising children, that's a great one because it's a really easy way to understand and externalize what's going on internally, which when we externalize it, it makes it a lot easier to understand for most people, and including us, just because we've been conditioned that way our whole lives. So when we look at the conversation around, like, how would I raise a child? How would I talk to a child? Like when I'm in my most regulated state, when I'm not triggered, that's exactly how you would want to talk to yourself, right? When you're thinking about, and where whatever's coming up is generally going to be wherever it fell short for you. So like, I would really be supportive and and ensure this kid that it's loved no matter what. Like, yeah, well, okay, that's coming to mind because that's not what I experienced. And so yeah, it's a powerful conversation, and I really like framing it that way, because if we want to kind of think about that, and to come back to your question a little bit more, I think it really comes down to just being a keen observer of human behavior and recognizing that whatever we're seeing, the patterns in other people, we have to apply that awareness to ourselves, and seeing where we have these patterns that are a little off. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so this raises I'm gonna raise another thing, right? That
Yeah.
that that I've been wrestling with lately, which is self-esteem, right? I'm sure you're gonna tell me how maybe self-esteem and ego are related, but maybe separate things. Whereas because for me personally growing up, I wouldn't say I had like a healthy self-esteem or that support that you were saying, right? Like I had to, and I'm still in that process of it, right? Like again, I'm
Yeah.
not perfect, but it's like I'm still in the process of like reteaching myself to be supportive just to me, like to be a friend to me, right? To be a
Yeah.
friend of my own mind. And I've noticed that when people are critical, even if they're coming from a place of love, it's like I really take that and I internalize that. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, like it tires me out when like someone comes at me with, even if they're trying to help me get better. Like obviously there's people who might maybe are just being mean, you know.
Yeah.
But if someone's coming from a place of criticism and it's ideally or hopefully rooted in love, yeah, man, I don't handle that well because I think it's like, again, rooted back to just not having a self-esteem in the past and like trying to again, triggers, right? And so
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. How would you equate
Yeah.
self-esteem to ego?
Well, I
Or take that
it's
as you will, you know what I mean?
yeah,
Maybe I'm not even framing it correctly.
it's deeply connected, and I kind of want, and I realized I forgot to answer part of your question before, but I think it all connects, which was like, how would you go about, reparenting yourself or parenting a child? And it's this sort of the same thing. You have to reparent yourself before you reparent a child. And I might need you to bookmark that and remind me of the second part of the question, because I just wanted to answer this again.
Yeah.
Um, the is if someone has the best intentions to raise a kid better than they were raised themselves, and they haven't done their own shadow work, so they're making that decision when they are in a regulated state, right? They're going like, okay, I'm feeling good, I'm going to be so much nicer to my son than my dad was to me. Awesome. But then, life happens, they have a kid, life happens, and they get triggered, and they're all of a sudden pulled into a dysregulated nervous system state. They are then not responding from the seat of the center of self, and they are responding from one of their ego parts, one of their, uh, you know, perfectionist parts, for example, and then they are unconsciously passing on that programming to their kid. So the question is, or the answer to the question, in my opinion, is like, you have to do the work on yourself if you think you're going to be a good parent. Like, you're not going to be a good parent if you just think you're going to. You have to do the work on yourself. You have to reparent your inner child, or else you're going to pass your that child is going to trigger that child is also going to trigger the memories of you at that age. And if you were in fear and being judged and rejected at that age, you're going to unconsciously pass that on to that kid as well. So um just answering that and kind of bringing it to, like, yeah, the self-esteem and ego thing, right, is like, it always comes back to self-love. Everything's always coming back to self-love. Like, every conversation that we have on, like, the spiritual journey is like, it's always going to come back to, like, self-love. We have to love ourselves more. And so having a healthy self-esteem is have like is having a healthy functioning ego, and that ultimately is like having an ego that operates as it's supposed to. Like, we're having this experience of we're having this illusory experience of separation, of being individualized, like, I'm different from you, I'm different from the person over there, when ultimately that is just an illusion. But this is part of the experience that we have chosen to come to here, we've signed up for. And so that part of us that experiences ourselves as separate, this ego consciousness, which is like, okay, yeah, I can share, but don't take too much of my stuff. And if you're taking too much of my stuff, I'm going to have some healthy anger to set a boundary, and I'm going to, make sure that I don't, walk into a wall, and this self-preservation stuff, right? That's what the ego's function is. That's where it sits, and it's supposed to be not in the driver's seat, as has been said many times. But our society has programmed us into operating our entire existence from the ego space, and that's when the aggrandized sense of egoic individual self, that's when that becomes more of a problem, when we start to attach too much meaning onto the little things, like, as you're saying, taking things personally. If someone is giving some criticism, well, if there's a trauma that's unhealed, if there's a survival mechanism that has been created because there's an unhealed trauma, an uncleaned trauma, then that trigger is going to exist, and you're going to take something personally, too personally. And again, bringing it back to four agreements, that's one of the four agreements: don't take anything personally, for a reason. And so when we have healthy self-esteem, that is leading into healthy ego, because healthy self-esteem, in my opinion, is loving oneself. And if we're truly loving ourselves, then we're not going to take things personally. Like, somebody can throw some pretty serious shade, and, like, if you love yourself, it's like water off a duck's back, right? Because you're not going to be triggered into a state that was first experienced as a child, when that really felt like somebody criticizing you was like a matter of life and death. It was an ego trigger, and the ego is meant to keep you alive physically, this physical vessel alive. And when you were feeling threatened, and that was something such as a criticism from a parent, for example, was interpreted as such an intense attack, because, well, in that case, and the reason most of this stuff happens before the age of 7 is because your parents are your lifeline, your entire lifeline at that point. Your God's keeping you alive at that point. So when they say something nasty to you, or criticize you, or even look at you wrong, and you feel that energy, it can feel very, very scary. And that's where those survival mechanisms come into play. And if that energy stays stuck in the nervous system, then there you are 20 years later, 25 years later, getting triggered by somebody criticizing you, and it's bringing up that same nervous system reaction. And it's all just because there's a stuck energy pattern in there, and that energy in there doesn't know that it's 20 years later. That energy in there that's stuck, that belief, that little part of you still feels like it's 4 years old, getting getting criticized by mom or dad and thinking like, oh shit, are they gonna not feed me anymore? Are they gonna like leave me? Are they gonna leave me behind at the next gas station? Like that's what the child mind starts to think. That's the level of activation that stays within us and why people are walking around with anxiety disorders.
Yeah. Still got some work to do, right? I think, I think that's kind of a good way to end it, man. I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect. I
But
still got some work to do.
But one thing I would throw in there, which I was going to mention before, is starting to shift our language, right? Like starting to shift the language and the way that we talk to ourselves. And this is where mirror work can be important, but just stopping saying something like, I'm not perfect. Because like in the eyes of our creator, you are perfect. And there's
Yeah.
the idea that you're not perfect is simply an idea. If you're saying that you're not perfect, you're saying that God is not perfect. You're saying that creation is not, the creator is not perfect because you exist. And if all is one and every person and every little being and every tree and every blade of grass is a part of that one, then that means that it was created on purpose. And if again, if all is one, if you took any one of those parts away, then the whole thing would collapse. So to think that anyone is not perfect exactly as they are, not that we don't use our conscious will to creatively improve things based on our awareness, but to not see everything as perfect is to miss the point because everything is perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. No, yeah. Yeah. I got to reframe that in my head anyways. Doesn't even exist, you know,
Yeah,
just an idea I was told.
exactly.
Well, Adam, thank you so much for giving me a lot to think about, as always.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steven.
Yeah, man, of course, of course. And if you got anything out of this one self discussion, we would love for you to engage with our community, subscribe to us on YouTube, um, follow us or leave a review on Spotify or Apple or TikTok, wherever we are. Just yeah, let us know your experience or anything that you're also trying to work on because maybe we are as well. And we can likely get most definitely, honestly, probably just going through something similar. And so yeah, all that to say, we'll get through it together, one foot in front of the other, and yeah, yeah, keep on stepping forward through life.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Of course.
Right on.
See you next time.
See y'all.